Hey friends, I don't know how long you've been a part of the Nothing is Wasted community, but I know that you are someone who values seeing transformational changes that can come out of the deepest depths of sorrow and pain. I'm sure the stories you've listened to on the podcast have been an encouragement to you, perhaps in your own story, and a beacon of hope in the long journey of healing. Would you like to see that kind of transformation, that kind of hope arise in your own community? Well, we have just the way for you to be a part of what God is doing in not only your story, but also in the stories of those around you. Consider sharing with your local church pastor and leaders, or perhaps your small group leader, about the Nothing is Wasted Pain to Purpose course. This course is a proven pathway to lead people through grief, trauma, loss, tragedy, major life transition, and into hope, healing, and newfound purpose. And you could be the catalyst that starts that process in your very own church by simply starting the conversation with your church leaders and letting them know about the incredible impact this course has had on you and can have on your local church body. We have countless listeners who have approached us and asked us for resources to get the Pain to Purpose course launched in their church. I've had multiple personal conversations with people as we've been connecting with their church leaders. And you can do the same thing. You can learn more about this at nothingiswasted.com/churches. Again, nothingiswasted.com/churches. And reach out if you have any questions on how to get the Pain to Purpose course started in your local church. With the right tools, real healing can happen in all of our stories and in the local church body that we attend and that we serve in. Don't wait. Learn more now about bringing the Pain to Purpose course to your church today. Well, hello, friends. Welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Davey Blackburn, and I'm so glad that you're joining us this week. We have an incredible conversation with a girl named Kellie Bullard, and she is, I mean, it's a horrible, awful, tragic story. But like many of our guests, as you talk to her, you just would not know that at 26 years old, overnight, she became a widow and a single mom to their 2-year-old daughter and 7-week-old son. I'm not going to share much of her story, but you know, Kellie just has an incredible, she has an incredibly hard story, but also she has incredible hope that she carries on her countenance and that she speaks with to bring all of us hope in whatever situation we're going through. And that's what I love about these stories is it doesn't matter what you've experienced, that as you listen to Kellie tell her story, you're going to derive hope and healing and inspiration and encouragement in your own story, no matter how difficult it is, no matter what it is that you're going through, whether it is the loss of a family member or whether it's something completely different. That's what I love about the insights that God draws out in these stories. You know, Kellie has just recently released a book called Behind My Smile, Finding Hope When Life Leaves You Feeling Shattered. I think many of us would say that there have been situations where life has left us feeling shattered. And so you're going to want to listen to this conversation and lean in, take notes as Kellie tells her story, but most importantly, how God has shown up in her story. And that's really what our ministry, that's what we want to be. That's our heart, is that we want to be a vessel that comes and meets you in your pain and provides you a pathway through your pain. And we have so many resources online, nothingiswasted.com, that can help you in that. And so before we jump into this conversation, I would love to point you to a Zoom call that I do probably about once a month. It's, you know, every so often. It's called 5 Steps to Taking Back Your Story, no matter what you've gone through. And in that hour, I walk through a bit of my own healing journey where God showed up in mine and how you can begin to look for God in your own journey. And then I'll connect you with resources that we have at our ministry that can help you on your own journey, a pathway, if you will, because there is a way through the valley of the shadow of death. Living, breathing testimony of that. We've had almost now 350 episodes of the Nothing is Wasted podcast that are living, breathing testimonies of the fact that God meets you in the middle of your valley. When you think that you are all alone, when you can't see your way through it, when you're confused, when you're trying to peer through the fog of how to even get up and start moving through this crisis that has gone on in your life, I promise you there is a way through it. And I want to show you that 5 steps to taking back your 5 steps to taking back your story, no matter what you've gone through. It's a Zoom call, live Zoom call, where I'll see your faces. If you want to, we'll interact. there'll be opportunities for Q&A. You can go to nothingiswasted.com/start here to register for the next one. Or you can just go to nothingiswasted.com, and at the top, there's a little thing that says start here, and you can click on that, register for the next 5 steps Zoom call. But I'd love to have you join us. All right. Without further ado, let's go ahead and step into my conversation with Kellie Bullard. Well, Kellie, thanks so much for joining me on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. It's so great to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You know, it's been really cool, even just off air, to be able to have some conversation with you. I'm so excited about this book that at the time people are listening to this has released your first and brand new book, Behind My Smile, Finding Hope When Life Leaves You Feeling Shattered. And I feel, you know, I told you this as we were talking and praying, I just feel a kindred spirit with you. One, because we both walked through very similar tragedies, but also because I've come to find out that you have been journeying along this, and we've been able to journey with you as a ministry. And so it's just really special to have this conversation with you. And I'm so grateful that you have taken some time to create some space and share this with our community. So I just thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It means a lot.
Kellie, before we dive into your story, why don't you tell us a little bit about like now, where you live, what you do? Just give us a little bit of kind of up to speed right now, what's going on in your life. And then we're going to dive back into your story and kind of talk through how you got to this place.
Okay. Yeah. So I am 29 years old. I live in central Illinois, very small farm town. I have 2 kids. I have a daughter who is 4 and a son who is 2. And they're amazing. I used to teach first grade. This is actually my first year not teaching. I kind of took a step back from teaching because just felt a different purpose and pull on my heart, and that was to write this book. So I quit teaching, and I've been writing a book for a few months now, and it'll be out there for you guys. So yeah, now I'm just kind of figuring out what my next steps are.
Wow. Anything, I'm just really curious right now, as you're saying that, you know, you're figuring out what your next steps are. I feel like that's so many people, they can relate to that kind of a question mark in their life. You know, you sense that God's got a new season for you. You sense that there's something on the horizon that's different than what your life has been about. We'll talk about in just a second. Part of the reasons for that kind of a crossroad in your life is because of this major tragedy that you've experienced. But how do you go about discerning? What are some steps you're taking right now to go, okay, God, what does that look like? Do I have is there something new, a new assignment you have for me other than what you had me in before, being a first grade teacher?
Yeah, I think for me, I tell the people closest to me, like just be praying for discernment, that I am, listening and following even when it's completely scary, and I'm leaving the unknown and taking this leap of faith to trust that God will provide. And while, there have been even quitting my job, I did that. It was scary. I'm alone with 2 kids that I need to provide for. So quitting my job, my source of income, that was terrifying. But I felt at peace about it. So I just know, like, whatever comes next, just that I can really hear God and be able to trust and follow for, whatever comes next. And I know that when it's right, I'll be at peace about it, just like I was with leaving my job.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's huge steps of faith to do that. And yet, most of us who have experienced that kind of a thing, we understand what it looks like, one, to be so unnerved by that step of faith, but then to see God come through in tremendous ways. And so I'm excited to see what God does next for you. Why don't we talk a little bit about, this is not the life that you would have seen for yourself, that you would have dreamed. Mm-hmm. So talk about what took place in your life and just kind of take us back to those moments that has led you to this.
Yeah. So back in college, it was 2013, I met this guy named Alex, and he, kind of intrigued me, and he became the first and only man I had ever dated. we grew very close very quickly. And then after we graduated, he proposed. And then almost like a year and a half later, 2018, we got married. And it was just kind of, like my life was going according to my plan that I had, graduate, meet someone, get married. And then we had our kids fairly quickly. So we had our first daughter. She was in April. They're both in April. So we had our daughter in April of 2019. And then we had our son in April of 2021. And at this point, life was everything I had prayed, asked, wanted. It was really good. After I had Crew, my son, I didn't struggle with postpartum depression the second time around. Alex and I, our marriage was in a really good place. Like we had figured out how to go from 1 to 2 kids, balancing each other and figuring out our roles now, and how to, give equal attention and love to both kids. We were just in a really, really good place. And looking back, that was so the Lord and such a gift. And there was one night Alex went and picked Hallie up from daycare, and he took her out to the farm with him. So Alex was a cattle farmer for his family farm. And so the farm is about 7 miles from our house, not far. And Hallie was out there with him. They rode around on the Ranger, looked at the cows, did chores. And the cows that was just his passion. It was what he was meant to do. And they came home that night, and Crew was like 6.5 weeks old. And he was a terribly fussy baby, constantly screaming, crying. And I was the only person who could hold him. Alex couldn't hold him. So it was just a lot of him being in a carrier on my chest, like 24/7. Yeah. So Alex and Hallie came home from the farm, and we had dinner together, all 4 of us. And, Crew was just in a wrap on my chest, and Alex went and put Hallie to bed. Dinner was like, oh man, like he was just in the best mood that night. I can't even describe it. Like we were joking around with each other. We were laughing. We were like, just so grateful for this life we had built. And he put Hallie down to bed. We cleaned up the living room, and I remember cleaning up the living room and all the toys. And he said, do you want another kid? And I had, this screaming baby on my chest. And I'm like, yes, like I want another kid. And he's like, it's going to be really hard, but like, you know what, we can do it. And I'm like, fully believe, like totally, like we're going to have at least one more. And so every night Alex would go out to the farm to check on the cows who were supposed to be calving at that time. So he did have cameras that he could get on his computer and check, but when they're like actually birthing, you kind of need to be there to see what's going on, if they need help, anything like that. So this is something he did every single night. Could take anywhere from like 30 minutes to an hour, maybe. So he went and said, all right, baby, I'm going to go check the cows. I'll be back soon. I love you. And I was walking around in the living room, bouncing Crew, cause that was his quote unquote witching hour. And I just kind of like mumbled, I love you, back to him. And he left, and he never came home. So he went out to check on the cows. He drove his truck out there, checked cows, was on his way home, and was in a single vehicle car accident. And so I had finally gotten Crew to sleep, and I sat on the couch and took out a book and started reading. He's still in the wrap on my chest. And I remember hearing like this loud, terrifying shriek, like this loud scream. And I was like, oh my, what was that? And I'm like, maybe that was Hallie. So I went and checked on Hallie, and she was sound asleep. And I remember feeling scared. Like, I kind of wish Alex was here to like check it out, make sure, like, something's not happening. And so the scream, I didn't hear the scream again. So I just kind of like blew it off. I got up and went in the kitchen and started cleaning up dinner. And at this point, it had probably been a little over an hour since Alex had left. And I was opening the dishwasher and my door started to open, and then there was a knock. And the words "took you long enough" were what I was about to say until I heard the knock, because at my house, you don't knock, you just walk right in. So I knew it wasn't Alex, and it was my neighbor, and her face, you just knew something was wrong. And she said, "Kellie, where's Alex?" And I said, "He's checking cows." And she said, "What is he driving?" I said, "The truck." And she took a deep breath and said, "Kellie, there's been a really bad accident. All we know is that it's a Bullard." And I remember like wanting to laugh, because if there was one thing Alex was, it was a great driver. Like, he drove loaded trailers with cattle through the mountains across the country. Like, I never worried about him driving. It was just something he was good at. And so I looked at her like, no. And I took my phone out and I called Alex, and he didn't answer. And I looked up his location, and it was exactly where she said the accident happened. And the accident happened about a quarter of a mile from our house. So he was about 30 seconds from home. He was so close. And I remember just like going into panic mode, and I said, "Will you stay here with Hallie?" And then I ran out the door, and asked her husband to take me to the scene. And she was like, "Yep, I'll stay with Hallie." She's like, "Do you want me to keep Crew?" And I said, "No, he won't go to you. Like, he's going to scream." So Crew is still in a wrap on my chest. I ran out and asked her husband, "Please take me there." And we drove up on the Ranger, and shortly we were there. And I jumped off the Ranger. It wasn't completely stopped, but it had slowed down, and I jumped off and I just ran toward his truck that was in the field that was completely unrecognizable. Just smashed, doors missing, flat tires, glass, like, and I ran to the truck and I said, "He's not in there. Where is he?" And I had multiple like police officers and first responders that were kind of like pushing me back towards the road and to get out of the field, saying like, "You need to back up. You can't be here right now." And I just kept saying, "Where is he? Where is he? Where is he?" And no one would tell me anything. All they would say is just like, "You need to calm down. You shouldn't even be here right now." And then there's a little bit of like trees, a few trees along like the fence line. So I couldn't see into the field where they were. And someone in the field yelled, "Was he with anyone?" And I was like, "What do you mean, was he with anyone?" "No, he wasn't with anyone. He was checking the cows." And I remember after, being pushed back a few times, I just went and stood in the middle of the road. The headlights on his truck were still on, and I'm holding Crew, and I was just swaying back and forth, staring at his truck. And the song Waymaker was playing on repeat in my head. I had not just listened to that song. We didn't just sing it at church. Like, it was, now I know it was just a gift from the Holy Spirit in the form of a song, but I just sat there singing Waymaker, holding Crew, swaying back and forth, staring at his truck. And as I did that, it's like my body just knew he was gone. None of the vehicles used sirens to get there, because I would have heard them. It was right by the house. The ambulance was just sitting in the middle of the road. I remember thinking, why isn't there a helicopter here to airlift him? And so I couldn't tell you how long I had been in the road swing back and forth, but eventually I went back toward the field and I said, I need to know if he has a fighting chance. I said, I have a 2-year-old and a newborn. I need to know if he's okay. And they just looked at me and said, I don't know. And at that time, an EMT walked over and she said, I think I can help. And she said, we did everything we could. And it's like, I couldn't hear anymore. Just like everything went black. And I could hear Alex's mom screaming no and hitting her knees. And the EMT kept talking, explaining maybe what they tried. I have no idea. And I just walked right back to the middle of the road where I'd been, held crew, stared at the truck, and swayed back and forth with Waymaker on repeat in my head. And there was, at that point, I noticed there was a minivan and there were kids in the back and they had just a TV on it. And I'm like, what in the world is a family doing at like a scene, Yeah. Come to find out, that was the scream I heard. That's who found my husband unconscious in the middle of a field and did CPR on him and called the police. And, they said that, the police helpers, EMT, whoever, had to rip him off Alex to take over doing CPR. Like, that's how hard this stranger tried to save my husband. And so I remember just going and sitting in the Ranger. I remember people coming up to me and touching me and saying things. I have no idea what they said. I did not hear a word. I remember nursing crew. And as I was doing that, I looked to my left and I saw my lively ADHD, fun, loving husband in a body bag, being taken to a stretcher in the road. And the first person who was next to me, I handed crew to them, and she didn't tell me, but at the time she was terrified to take him because she's like, he's just going to scream. And crew didn't make a peep the whole night. So I went and I stormed towards that stretcher. I was like, I did not believe him until I could see it for myself. And I stormed toward the stretcher. And again, people pushed me back and said, you need to wait. The coroner will take you there. And so the coroner came over and gave me his wallet and asked, where was he born? I answered the question. He continued to ask questions and I took off toward the stretcher. And I remember my father-in-law chasing after me, and he said, Kellie, I need you to be strong. And I said nothing, stuck my hand back, held his hand, and we walked over together. And then there was Alex laying on a stretcher. I remember, this is kind of gruesome, but his right eye wasn't closed. And I'm like, they're wrong. He's here. And I just threw myself on him and he was cold. And I mean, it's the strangest thing to lay your head on your husband and not feel them breathing. I laid there for a long, long time. I didn't want to let go of him. And when I was finally ready, I got up and I turned around it was dark, but the sirens were flashing. So that's what gave us light. There are no street lights out in the country. And I just had like a circle of all the volunteers, police, EMT, all that. And I looked at them and said, he is so cold. Can you please keep him warm? And I don't even know why I said that. When someone passes away, their blood stops circulating and that happens. But I had never experienced that before. And he was a warm-blooded person. He was always hot. And they didn't answer me. And my father-in-law just said, they will, Kellie, they will. And so then I was determined to find his cell phone. I'm like, I need to find this because this is going to give me a clue as to what in the world happened. And so I kind of refused to leave until I found it. And my neighbor eventually found it and gave it to me. And my sister had drove up. She lived an hour away at the time. And so she had just like gotten there and she took me home. And I got home, put Crew down, and went and laid with Hallie in her crib, just sobbing because I knew when she woke up, this daddy's girl wasn't going to have her daddy anymore. And I remember going to the bathroom, and when I walked into the bathroom, I stepped on something, and I looked down, and it was our dog Gunner's favorite toy. And I just said, oh my gosh, Gunner. Like, I had totally forgotten about him. And my mother-in-law was walking in when I screamed that, and she said, he didn't make it either. He was with Alex. And like that thought just had escaped my mind. And I'm like, no wonder they were asking me if he was with anyone. Like, our dog was also in that field. And one other thing I forgot to mention, but earlier that day, Alex had come home to switch vehicles. He needed to get his truck instead of the car. And it was a super hot summer day. It was June 10th. And we have these doors in our living room with blinds on them. I always leave them open. Alex, when he came home, he shut those blinds to keep the heat out. And as I sat down that night, when he had left to go check cows and was reading, I was sitting on the couch where my direct vision would have been looking right out the window, exactly where the accident happened. So had Alex not come home and closed the blinds earlier that day, I would have seen his headlights flipping through the air. I would have seen it. It was dark. And that was my direct line of vision. So, I think that looking back, it's like, that's just another way I was sheltered, by God and Alex coming home and closing the blinds earlier. So yeah, I remember, my family came in immediately. And I didn't know what sleep was. I'm sure you can relate to that. Like, insomnia was so real. And I had this newborn who needed to be fed every 2 hours. And I had, I stopped eating. I remember, like, I could feel my milk supply dropping, and I didn't know who I was without Alex, or I didn't know how to be a parent without him, because that's all I had known was him being with me and with us. Yeah. So yeah.
Man. Wow, Kellie. Well, first of all, thank you for walking through all of that. I know that when you walk through the details of the most horrific thing that's ever happened to you, it can take your breath away still. And I know for me and for, I'm sure everybody listening right now, it took my breath away just to hear you talk about it. I can't imagine all of the emotions that you were experiencing that night and then in the days to follow. But I can tell even as you're sharing it, and I know that you have seen this as you've been writing your story, that it's really cathartic and healing to share it again. Hey friends, one of the most unique parts of what we do here at Nothing is Wasted Ministries is to bring very specific resources to very specific pain points. While pain can be a common denominator for all of us, your journey is undoubtedly unique through the trials, difficulties, and challenges that you face. Our latest masterclass is for a very special group of people. In honor of our veterans, this one is for our military veterans. The toll of military-related stress and trauma has led to rising suicide rates and families struggling, often in silence, through the unseen cost of serving our country. In our newest masterclass, Healing for Veterans, Navigating the Unseen Scars of Military Service, our dear friend of the podcast, Fernando Arroyo, will help veterans and those they love find a way through the residual effects of extreme stress and combat-related pain. Now, if you or someone you know is a veteran and needs a practical way forward, this masterclass is for you. Again, it's called Healing for Veterans, Navigating the Unseen Scars of Military Service, and it's taught by our friend Fernando Arroyo. Now, you can purchase this class a la carte by going to nothingiswasted.com/masterclass, or better yet, go and join our Community Plus membership, and you can get this class and all of our content in our growing content library, including all the other masterclasses that we've produced, all the mini courses that we've produced, all the bonus episodes that we've had for the Nothing is Wasted podcast that you can't access on the podcast platform. All of that stuff under our Community Plus membership, and we are constantly adding more content to it. Just $20 a month. By the way, that $20 a month is a tax-deductible donation. So we send you a statement at the end of the year. And so you're not only getting content for this that's going to be helpful to you and to friends and family members, but you're also helping Nothing is Wasted continue to move forward and reach people beyond the spaces of your own sphere and beyond what we could do without you. So head over to nothingiswasted.com/community plus if you want to learn more and sign up for Community Plus today, and that will give you immediate access to this new masterclass. Now listen, our military veterans sacrifice so much for each and every one of us, and yet there's often a hidden cost to their service. And I believe that this masterclass is going to give hope to those who give so much to our country. So join us and our friend from Fernando Arroyo for this masterclass, Healing for Veterans, Navigating the Unseen Scars of Military Service. By signing up for Community Plus or by purchasing this masterclass a la carte, you will get it on demand right there where you can watch it at your own convenience. Sign up today. And we know that you're going to experience so much healing by hearing from Fernando Arroyo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had kind of given into believing what society kind of deemed was grief and how to handle that. And then I got knocked down and just thrown in this valley of grief, and I had no idea how to navigate it. I remember my pastors came over first thing the next morning, and they just said, like, what do you need? What can we do? And at a time where I knew nothing for certain in my life, I just said, I need to remember God's promises, because if I don't, I won't get through this. And I just... I remember my sister that night, we sat on the couch and she just said, Kellie, God wasn't surprised by this. And at first it made me angry because I'm like, well, I am. Like, in my mind, God, you made a mistake. And I've come to learn, like how I felt, how I was grieving, as sad and hurt and upset as I was, like, God felt that even more. And it's just this like powerful almost bond, right? When you're in these deep trenches and you need something to hold on to for turbulence. And I had been holding on to these horizontal earthly things to help get me through that was giving me no satisfaction. Like, my relationship with God has never been as deep and intimate as it was after I lost Alex, because like that was the only thing I knew for certain in my life. And no matter how my emotions changed, no matter how I felt, like God was steadfast and he was there for me every step of the way. You might have heard this. I think it's called like Footprints in the Sand. But yeah, like, there's those two set of footprints when life's, fine and dandy, and then it stops and it goes to one set of footprints. And it's like, see, God, where were you? Like, you weren't there for me when I needed you. And it's like, no, I was carrying you. I was carrying you through that. And it's like, man, when you go through your worst nightmare, like, there's an undeniable and unexplainable sense of peace that you get, right? That can only come from God. And it's like, I shouldn't feel like this. I really shouldn't, but I do, because I know, like, there's the one who knows my story and the one who wrote it. Like my sister said, he wasn't surprised by this.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that as you start to grapple with some of that reality. God knew this. He's not surprised by this. And yet he allowed this. And I'm trusting in the promises of God that he's a good father, that he has good plans for me, that he cares for me, that he was more grieved about this than I was, even though that's hard to imagine. But how do you reconcile those things? How do you see God as a good father? Or going back to even what you were, how he brought you into that moment where you were just singing Waymaker in the moment of hearing this news and coming across this scene of your worst nightmare taking place. And here you are steeped in the promises of God that he is a Waymaker, and reminding yourself of that. What are some of the ways that in the aftermath God began to show you that? Because I'm a firm believer in, as he's carrying you through, there are little glimpses that he gives you, little invitations that he gives you that brings you into that deep place with him where he begins to show it to you, not just tell it to you, but show it to you.
Yeah. And I think, in those horrible, traumatic moments, it's so easy to be like, God, where were you? Like, where are you in my story? I relate it to my kids. Like when they're trying to do something, my 2-year-old, when he's trying to put his shoes on and he can't get it right away, he just screams instead of being like, Mom, can you please help me? Like it's easier for me to be angry and say, God, where were you? Than it is to just be like, God, please help me. Please get me through this. Like I need you now more than ever. Wow. And I think, at the time I didn't see it. I didn't see him in my story. And then, as I took the time to like genuinely ask, like, God, where were you? Like, and I'm not asking that to condemn in a mean spirited way. It's truly like, I need to know you were there. And it's like, Kelly, I closed those blinds for you so you didn't see it. You had crew on your chest at the scene, so you were pretty rational. I like Waymaker playing on repeat in your head. Like that wasn't a coincidence. The way like people began showing up for us, daycare is still being paid for by people who donated money and said like, we want to help. Meals for the next 6 months. My church set up meals for 6 months and then some. I have Crew's potty trained now, but I think I maybe bought two boxes of diapers ever.
Wow.
Diapers, wipes, pull-ups, everything was supplied for us. And then I got fixated on the song Jireh by Elevation. And I remember in that song, it says, I will be content in every circumstance. And I remember thinking like, I am not content in this. So contentment began to be something I really wrestled with God, with myself, my own heart. And it's like, he is still good no matter what. Like we live in this fallen world. And God promised us in the Bible, like you will go through pain and sorrow, but he doesn't end it there. He says like, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And it's like, we are all going to go through our valleys. I think you said this, like the thing we all have in common is pain. And so, we're not going to get out of that valley, I believe, unless we do it with God. So I realized in my own grieving journey, I always believed in God, was raised Christian, went to church. But I think being saved and fully surrendering is completely different. So up until then, I believed in God. I kind of did all the checklist things. And then it's like, okay, like there's got to be more to this. Like I almost felt like I couldn't bring my anger to him. I couldn't take my questions to him. And it's like, Kellie, he already knows what you're thinking. Right. And I felt so much power in releasing that to him, and being, God, why did this happen? Why now? Why with the little kids, why him? And I felt like after I kind of took that out on him, because he's big enough to handle it, I just said, God, I don't know what you're doing. I don't, but I trust you. And it felt like this weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt like I had to be everything to everyone, especially with 2 fully dependent children on me. And it's like, I don't have to. And I just remember like this sense of peace, like, what is it? Psalm 23, like leading the sheep. And it's like, he was leading me. Like, that's right. I just needed to surrender and be like, okay, Lord, I finally realize, I'm not in control, no matter how desperately I want to be. It's your plan, your will, not mine. And I feel like once I finally said that, it was just like, all right, let's do this. Follow me. Here we go. So that was like a big break, if you will, in my journey, in my grief journey, and in my relationship with God.
Yeah. That's so powerful what you're saying, Kellie, because, I can relate with that, with the idea of surrender being a big critical juncture in my own healing journey. And, as the more people I talk to and hear stories like yourself, the more I realize that is probably the most critical breakthrough that we can all come through, the place where we finally let go and we say, all right, Lord, this is not what I would have written for myself, but you are the author and perfecter of my faith. You're the author of life. And I surrender to you. I trust you and believe that you are in control, that you have good things for me in this. And then, as you were saying earlier, there's this place of you, at first you are realizing you're needing to find contentment. You had gotten to this place in life with Alex where it seemed like you guys were in a flow and life was good and you were in a place of contentment. And it's certainly not that God's like, okay, well, now everything's good, I'm going to like create this thing in your life by any means whatsoever. But it almost, in this world, as we're going to experience trouble, God is constantly going to invite us into, from that trouble we experience, coming back to the place and the source of our contentment. And that is so much a part of our healing journey that I want to underscore what you're saying there, because that is so imperative to our healing journey. There's so many practical tips and tricks that the world is going to try to throw out there for us and say, here's how you should grieve, and here's some things you can do. And while those are helpful, and while there is common grace in this world that God gives us, there is something that's so pivotal, and that is surrendering to God's healing plan for your life. Because it's going to be different for you. It's going to be different for me. It's going to be different for everybody as he walks us through the valley. Well, friends, the wait is finally over. The Nothing Is Wasted book is out and available now wherever you buy books. This story is not just Amanda and my story, but it's a part of a bigger story, a story that I promise you, as you read it, it will remind you that in your story, nothing is wasted. Listen, pain is real, life is hard, but my hope is that as you read this story, you'll be able to see the ways in which God is showing up for you, and he's walking you through, sometimes carrying through the valley, no matter what you face, and that he always is with you. I'm so grateful for you being a part of this Nothing Is Wasted community, and for you being a part of my healing journey. And I can't wait for you to get a copy of Nothing is Wasted, the book. You can go to nothingiswastedbook.com to order your copy now. You can buy it anywhere books are on sale. And you can also pick up an audiobook if you can stand to hear me reading the book to you. I'm so grateful for you, and I'm excited to hear how this book is impacting you in your own personal journey. Nothingiswastedbook.com. Pick it up today and let us know how it's impacting you.
And I will say too, like, even with surrendering, I was like, hey, I did this, it's done. And it's like, it's not a one and done. Like sometimes it's multiple times throughout the day. Sometimes, like there are those hard days where I still am like questioning him. Like, are you sure you're going to do what you say you're going to? And in those moments of that deep grief and sorrow, it's like my head and my heart work against each other. Like I know who God is. I know who the Bible says he is, but it's hard in those moments to fully surrender and trust. But I will say, like, when you do, it's like an overwhelming peace. That's like, okay, let's do it.
Wow. It's happened in 2021. And so we're 3 years removed from this moment. And, you're able to share this, but there's still, I'm sure, a little bit of a twinge of pain, maybe a lot that you're experience as you're sharing it. There's a lot of people that would ask, okay, maybe they're in the throes of it. They've just gotten some news last week or this past year, something has upended their life and they feel like they're at complete rock bottom and they're going, am I ever going to get through this? Am I ever going to feel differently? What would you say to that person if you're sitting across the table having coffee with them and they're going, I don't see how this is ever going to change, how I'm ever going to not feel this way?
Yeah. First I would tell them I am so sorry. And second, I would just say, I remember in the beginning when people would say, there's a light at the end of a tunnel. I'm like, no, there's not. Like, you are wrong. All this is I am fully consumed by my grief. There is no light, and I don't see how that's going to change. And as I did the hard work of growing my relationship with God. And it's like when I was at home with my baby and my daughter was off at daycare, if I was not in the Word or doing a devotional, like that gave the enemy more time to get into my head. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And so if you're not making a conscious effort to hold on to the one thing that can satisfy you and get you through, you will succumb to these lies that the enemy is putting in your head. So I knew if I wasn't reading the Word, if I wasn't in a devotional, I would go to a deep, dark place. And I felt the more I did this, the more, like, I've never audibly heard God talk to me, but he showed up in the passages that would come to me for that day. And it's like the craziest thing. Like he knows what you need if you're willing to let him show you. Right. I mean, I don't think, like, my advice is just get in the Word as much as possible, or else your mind, like, your faith will go to something else if it's not with God.
That's so good. It's amazing. You hear, it's like the closest thing to the audible voice of God when he's showing up in those moments. It's this still small voice that's whispering and you're just like, wow. When the Word just comes alive and you really do see the Word is living and active, that it is, it is, he is using the Word right now to walk with me, and I'm reading it, but it's reading me and I'm seeing his Word speak directly to me in these moments, in these seasons. Here's what I'm curious along those lines. I know so many people can relate as they've walked through the valley of the shadow of death. I know for me, I learned a whole lot about God that I didn't realize before. And I learned a whole lot about me that I didn't realize before. You said earlier that, you didn't know who you were without Alex. But I'm confident, we haven't talked about this before, but I'm confident that you have learned a whole lot about yourself and who you are. And most importantly, who you are in Christ. Maybe take that as a two-part question. What have you learned about God that you didn't know before, probably wouldn't have known without going through this? And then what have you learned about yourself too?
Yeah. So, what have I learned about God? He, every promise he's made, he's kept. And God is good and kind no matter what, like, period.
Can you just hold on, just stop right there. I mean, like, you just shared with us the most horrible thing that anybody can imagine. And yet you still right now, 3 years later, can say God is good and he is kind. Like,
Yeah.
How can you say that? I mean, I know how you can say that, but there's people listening that are going, how in the world can you say that, Kellie?
I just, the relationship and the ways he's shown up, and, he is who he says he is, right? Like, we didn't write those things in the Bible, making that up. He did. So it's like, if we can trust, that God, like, it doesn't compare to the joy that's coming, right? We just need to have a little bit of faith and walk alongside him in that. And I've just seen him do so many beautiful things in my life and with the kids. And it's like, I knew you say you're good, and, you will never forsake us, and you're near to the brokenhearted. And then it happens and you're like, man, this is tangible evidence that you are who you say you are. And if we can just believe and trust that, like, we will get through. And it took me going through my worst nightmare to see that, like, not see it, but I guess, like, fully understand it, as opposed to just, reading about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, take the second part of that question. What have you learned about yourself? Who are you as you're now coming to this new place of, as my counselor called it, a new season of contentment, where, when you lose a spouse, especially, right, the way I described it is that the two become one, you really are one. And then you feel like half of who you were. Yeah. And now you're trying to become a whole person again without Alex. So what have you learned about yourself, and how has that fleshed itself out as you are becoming whole?
Yeah. I mean, I really had to relearn how to do almost everything and rewire my brain, because Alex isn't here to do it for me. I realized, I'm a lot. I was 26 at the time of the accident, and I had never felt like I was independent. I felt like I relied on Alex. I needed something, he'd get it. I needed him there for me. I needed anything, like, Alex was that for me. And so I feel this sense of, like, independence of, like, I can do that. Like, I can be a parent to my kids and be a good one at that. I feel like, my faith has grown. I'm just stronger in so many ways. I think death makes you realize what's important in life. And I think before I was very selfish, and I would get worked up over small things, where now it's like, Kellie, it doesn't matter. I feel like I have this viewpoint that this is not our home. Eternity is. And, that's what we should be working toward. So I felt almost like I mean, it sounds terrible. I felt like I was living this, like, superficial life, and now I feel a sense of purpose. And I feel like I can connect with people on a deeper level going through grief, because I never understood that before. So while I feel like a whole new person in different ways, I feel like God's made me better in so many aspects of my life, and really taught me the important things in life, rather than, the worldly things. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I love that you said that. It feels weird to say this, but I felt like I was living a superficial life. And I mean, this morning I dropped the kids off at school, and then I was in the car, and I just felt like I needed to spend some time in prayer. So I turned I was listening to a podcast at the time. I turned the podcast off, and I was just talking to the Lord. And kind of laying out some stuff that's going on to him and how I'm feeling about it. But I got kind of emotional thinking that very same thing, going, I see how much you've done in my life and how much you've grown me as a person through everything that I've gone through. And it's very difficult for me to reconcile. It almost seems like it took that for me to get to this place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to look back and admit that. And in life you kind of go, but I want to be more a person who's shaped more into the image of Christ without having to go through difficult things. Yeah. And yet we see throughout Scripture over and over and over that suffering is producing that in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I don't think on this side of eternity we'll ever be able to explain. But I think every person watching this who's experienced this, listening to this, experienced what you and I have experienced, they can go back and they can say, yeah, you know what? I'm a different person now in so many good ways, because almost as a direct result of what happened. Mm-hmm. And that's very tough to reconcile. I don't think I have any answers for that either, Kelly. It's like, I wish I had answers, but I don't have any answers. But we can hold those things in tension and just say, okay, God, thank you for what you're doing through this. I never would have asked for this. And,
right.
But I also know you have shown me you have good plans for me as we move forward.
Yeah, I used to say, like, if God came over and we sat down and had a cup of coffee, I would have a list a mile long of other ways he could have gotten me to this point. And, none of them would include what actually happened. So, I'm not thankful for the accident. I'm not thankful that I lost my husband, but I am thankful for who it's made me.
True. That's such a great way to put it. Such a great way to put it. And I think it's really important in grief. So many times we are very binary and black and white until we go through a valley and we realize, okay, there's so much that is both and. I'm not thankful for this. I'm not grateful for this. But I am grateful for what it's made me. And what a great distinction right there, Kelly. That's really, really powerful. One of the things we haven't talked about is how to walk young kids through this. I mean, at the time, your kids were, you said 4 and 2, right?
Now they're 4 and 2.
Now they're 4 and 2. I'm sorry. So they were really young.
So two and a baby. Almost 7 weeks.
7 weeks. Oh my goodness, Kelly. Wow. Man.
Yeah. Well, and that's something.
Yeah. That has its own complications in and of itself. Talk to me a little bit about that as you're trying to walk them through that. They're not understanding what's going on, and yet they're affected by it. They're impacted tremendously.
Oh yeah. That's something no one prepares you for. And my crew was just a baby, so I had time before I had to explain that to him. But I remember at some point the next day, because every time the phone rang or the door opened, Hallie was like, "Daddy's home, Daddy's calling." And at some point, I don't even remember when, I just said, "Hey, Hallie, Daddy went to be with Jesus in heaven." And honestly, that time was such a blur. Like, I think she just kind of brushed it off, like, whatever. Yeah. So we began reading a lot of books before bed about heaven, about death, about grief, just to kind of try and start up conversations. And she still doesn't get it. She's like, "Mommy, why can't we go be with Jesus? Like, why can't I just go be with Daddy for the day?" It's just like a gut wrenching, reoccurring conversation that continues to happen. I don't quite fully understand it, so I don't know how she could.
I know.
And now almost 3 years later, Crew is starting to get that same way Hallie was with, I'll find him sitting in a corner with his head down, almost pouting because he misses Daddy or he wants Daddy. And in the beginning with Hallie, I mean, we went through a lot of regressions, a lot of acting out. And then she would always just say it's because she misses Daddy. And it's like she knew if she said, I miss daddy. She got my full attention. So then we had to do, it's okay to miss daddy. You can feel all those feelings, but you cannot hate your brother. You cannot steal this toy,
Yeah.
So Hallie was waitlisted to get into play therapy for almost a year. She actually just quote unquote graduated from therapy. So she was in therapy for about a year, and people kept asking me, like, why are you putting her in therapy so young? Like, why would you do that? And I'm like, I'm an adult, and I mean, beyond the accident, I think I've worked through issues that come up in other ways that I'm like, oh man, I need to figure that out. And I just know, as little as they were, like, if I tried to just brush it aside, that it could show up in other ways the older they got.
Yeah.
And I want them to know, like, it's okay. We can talk about daddy whenever you want. I haven't fully explained the accident. It's a car accident, but when they get older, I will be fully transparent with them about everything I know about the situation. And I don't remember where I heard this, but they said it's important with your kids not to make the parent who passed away like this idol, this perfect being. And so, like, they know daddy made mistakes too. And I try to bring him up, if we're eating dinner, I'll be like, oh, like, this was daddy's favorite dinner. Like, just little ways so that they can still know their dad and his love for them, even though he's not physically here. And I mess up. I don't do it right. I'm just trying to do the best I can.
There is so much grace there, because we're all messing up over and over and over when it comes to our kids. I mean, parenting in and of itself, right? It is probably the most difficult task God has asked any of us to do.
Yeah.
And then parenting on top of grief, that is, I mean, it's impossible, we have often found ourselves in places where we're going, Lord, we have no idea what to do. And we really need you to help. We need your help. We need your help. And he's faithful, and he's good, and he's kind. And it's good for us to remember that God is a loving father, not just to us, but to them. And he's so kind and tenderhearted with their hearts. And this is part of their journey too. And part of their journey of sanctification, to come to a new season of contentment, to come to a place of surrender. And God's going to lead them in that, just like he's led you in that. I would affirm you in that, Kellie, that people said the same thing to me, you don't need to put him in therapy, or, this early, or why would you do that? And I'm on this side of things, my son Weston's 9, our daughter's 10. She went through major transition with divorce. I would say, I wish we had early on. I wish we had. Because I think we're too close. It's almost like a counselor who's trying to counsel themselves through their own tragedy. It's like, no, you're too close to your own grief. You're too close to your own situation. Just like you need somebody else to walk with you who is subjective and who is not so immersed emotionally. You need your child needs somebody as well. And so you guys can take that journey together, or however that looks, but it's so important for them to learn, man, these things that are going on inside of me, I already don't know how to process my emotions. I already don't know how to articulate those things as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, but to be able to help them learn how to process that stuff over time, and using a third party is so beneficial. And so, I'm grateful that you're doing that.
Yeah. And I will say too, like, Hallie, it was just mainly like a play therapy. So a lot of people thought it was like the therapy I was doing, like, you sit down and you talk about, and it's like, no, like, if daddy comes up, he comes up. If he doesn't in a session, he doesn't. So like, my goal for her was to be able to identify and communicate her emotions instead of just saying, I miss daddy. And so, further on down the road, she might need to go again to process daddy in the accident, and that's okay. But I do think this whole experience, like, has led me to talking to my kids about God and praying with them way earlier than I might had if this not happened.
Yeah. Yep. And then trying to, like you said, break down these really difficult concepts and, break it down to them in a way that they can somehow wrap their head around, age appropriately. Yeah. And it is difficult, but it also stretches us too, right? Doesn't it? It's like,
oh yeah.
Now I'm wrapping my head around some of these big concepts of faith that I just kind of accepted before, but now I'm going, no, I'm going to kind of dig into this so I can understand it fully for myself too. Kellie,
totally.
You have written and released this book, Behind My Smile. And I'm just curious what do you want for the reader when they pick this up? What should they expect when they read this? What do you want for them?
Yeah, I think I had like two main goals in writing this book. And one, it was for people to understand the raw, deep, vulnerable side of grief. And then the other one was just to further their relationship with God. Whether you don't have one, you're just beginning or you're matured in your faith, like that it would help grow your relationship with him through, my experience and what he's gotten me through.
Wow. I love that you are taking your pain and you're turning it around to helping other people. I believe firmly that that's where redemption takes place in our life. That's where it starts. And that you're
pain to purpose, right?
That's right. That's where, you're turning people to Jesus. You're showing people, hey, Jesus is the hero of my story. He's the one that led me through the valley. He's the one that pulled me through this journey. And he's the one that brought about my healing. And
totally.
And I love that. Kellie, you're very active in sharing about this, even on social media and other places. Where can people follow what's going on? Because your story's not over. My story's not over. None of our stories are over. And so it's going to be really intriguing and cool to see how God continues to write the next chapter of your story. I'm sure people want to follow along with you. Where can they do that?
Yeah. So I am probably most active on Instagram, but Instagram, Facebook, and my Substack are all just Kellie Bullard.
Okay. Very easy. Very easy.
Yeah.
Kellie, thank you so much for spending time sharing your story, being so vulnerable with this, and just allowing us. That we consider this an honor that you would trust our community to recount some of these details too. And it's very painful. It's very hard. It's very vulnerable. And so thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. Your podcast has done the same for me, so I'm glad to give back.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Nothing is Wasted podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation and found it as encouraging and insightful as we did. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen, and leave us a rating and review. Your feedback helps us to connect to those who need these stories of hope and healing most, and to reach more listeners just like you. Also, subscribe to our Nothing is Wasted Ministries YouTube channel. Now be sure to stay connected with us on social media. You can follow us at Nothing is Wasted Ministries, follow me at Davey Blackburn, and follow Aubrey at ObSam. We'd love to interact with you, so be sure to stop by and let us know how these conversations are impacting you and your story. And if you want to learn more about all the incredible resources we have available to help you navigate whatever valley you're walking through, visit our website at nothingiswasted.com. If you're ready to get started in your journey towards healing and finding purpose in your pain, we'd love to help. Simply go to nothingiswasted.com/start here for your next step. Lastly, a big thank you to Sleeping at Last for providing all the music for the Nothing is Wasted podcast. We want to thank our guests, and we want to thank you, our Nothing is Wasted community, for tuning in regularly. Remember, no matter what challenges you face, whatever pain you are walking through, nothing is wasted. We'll see you next time for another incredible conversation here on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. But before you go, check out this short clip from our next episode. Thanks for joining us, friends.
One of the first things I had to kind of realize is like, I had to get to the problem. Like, what is the problem?
Yeah.
And for me, I had read a ton of books on rest. When a new book came out on rest, I wanted to read it. But my overarching feeling after I would read the books was, I'm the problem. I am not good at this. My life, this will not work for my life. I can't just quit everything. I can't just quit my calling.
Yeah.
I can't just quit showing up for my kids. So many of even the practical steps were just not applicable to me. And I would think like, this is my fault, that this is a me problem. And so even what you just said about like right now, there's so much coming at all of us. One of the first things I learned kind of applying the scientific method to this issue was saying like, what's the problem here? Well, the problem is we're alive in the year 2024 and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah.
Physically, it's too much. Environmentally, it's too much. Mentally, it's too much. Emotionally, it's too much. And spiritually, I mean, whether you've been walking with the Lord for a year or whether you've been walking with the Lord for 2 decades, some of the spiritual issues that we're dealing with, that we're coming against, that many of us have been taught are like ours to carry and ours to figure out, specifically as women.
Yes.
That we've been taught like, this is yours to do, this is yours to hold, when maybe Jesus would have never said that. That was kind of the first problem that I encountered was that like so much of what's making me tired, Jesus never asked me to do never asked me to hold. But other people did in Jesus' name. And so I have to kind of sort that out.